Welcome to Golf and the Good Life, your guide to golf travel across the pond. I'm DJ Jones, joined by my friend and colleague Connor Evers. Connor, the 2023 golf travel season is starting, as we speak. It's a pretty exciting time for all of us at H&B. And that also means that, golfers around the world and all of our members, they are soon going to encounter today's topic, and that's the caddies.
You got that right. I cannot believe we're already here. We are recording this in early April, and our first group leaves on Easter Sunday. So it is coming up here momentarily. I can't believe it, but we're already here, and our partners and everyone across the pond's ready for our groups to get across and enjoy their expeditions to Scotland and Ireland and England and Spain or what have you, where they're going. But yep, it's here and we're looking forward to it. And again, one of those big things that we get a lot of questions on, especially a few weeks before groups are going to travel or what have you, is caddies. How does it work? How does it compare to the experience I've had here in the States? I think the goal of today that DJ and I are going to do is just kind of explain the process, how it all works. There is some differences. There's also a lot of similarities between having a caddy in the States side comparatively to across the pond. And I think today we're just going to clear up some of the questions, and hopefully this will be a good guide for folks that are about to travel across the pond.
Absolutely. Well, before we dive headfirst into that, just a quick note about our last episode regarding packing, because inevitably we hit end on recording and realize, oh man, we forgot two things. And it's just like packing in general. There's always that one thing. Well, the one thing that I always forget that we would be remiss not to mention is sunglasses. And it's not something that you think about, but overseas, you get some super bright days and you're going to wish that you had them. So, if you go back and listen to last week's episode, add sunglasses to the list. But Connor, you had one that was actually, I think, even more important than than I wear.
Sure. And I'll add to that too, maybe SPF 50 or 70, whichever your preference is. There's a couple of rounds in October. I would have liked definitely sunglasses. That's another thing I didn't pack. And to our credit now, I'll definitely put that in the suitcase going forward. But SPF too, you just never know. Probably not, but you just don't know. But my thing that I completely forgot, we got off the air and I was like, oh, I should get out of this too. But air tags. Some people may know them. They just look like a quarter. And they're an Apple device, Apple product, I should say. And it's very easy to use. You pair them up to your phone, and it's essentially a GPS tracker for your bags. And funny enough, we had a group last year that the gent was flying through London Heathrow, and as unfortunately a lot of people have this scenario, especially to Heathrow, they lost his luggage and he didn't have it for a couple days, and he ended up having the GPS coordinates for the bag, and the people at Heathrow were saying, oh, it's lost, we don't know, think it's in the States. And he's like, no, it is right next to me. It is in this storage facility that's right by Heathrow. And ended up sending a screenshot of the coordinates on his phone via the AirTag and got his bag back the next day. And it was a suitcase, not clubs, but you're still buying luggage or buying clothes during the week. So handy tool for sure to make sure you know absolutely exactly where your clubs are if they're on the plane, where have you. So yeah, definitely a good tool that you want to invest in for sure.
Yeah, don't leave home without it. They can be a savior. Like you said, there were times last year where the airlines were really struggling with golf bags. We all saw the stories, and especially around the Open. And there were people on Twitter and so forth that were saying, I knew where my golf bag was and the airline didn't, and I went and found it at this warehouse, like you said. That's an extreme case, but knowing where it is it can definitely add some peace of mind. I used it last year for the first time, and like you said, there was a little bit of delay. Once I landed, my golf bag still said it was still in Manchester, and yet it was rolling out on the conveyor. So, but can really come in handy if your bag goes astray. But those are just two things to add. If you happen to go back to the last episode on packing, add those two things, three things, I should say, with the sunscreen to the list. But moving on to today's topic, and that's caddies. Like Connor said, next to packing, caddies are probably the number one source of questions, especially this time of year as trips are getting close and people are wondering how caddies work. And, one of the main questions we receive is, do I even need a caddy? And the short answer is, it depends. The thing to know is that, you are going to essentially be expected to walk the courses overseas, either with a caddy, carrying your bag, or using a trolley. And so, um, in our view, if you're headed over, and especially if you're playing one of the marquee courses like the Old Course in Royal County Down, and let's face it, most most Americans heading across the pond are playing, those big name courses. You don't want to do that armed with just the course guide and a trolley, especially if it's a one and done trip for you and it's the only time you're going to play it. Invest in the caddy. Number one, your scorecards are going to thank you. Their ability to find golf balls in the heavy rough is uncanny. There is some Harry Potter stuff going on there that I just cannot explain. You are never going to find golf balls to the degree that they do. And so all of those strokes are all strokes saved. The courses, the blind shots are common. Oftentimes the caddy's going to tell you use this 14th century steeple in the distance as your line. And, all of that adds up to a better experience from your scorecard's perspective. But really what it comes down to is what they're bringing to the experience in terms of the stories you're going to have later, and the quips, the one liners, all of that. You just can't replicate that between just you and your buddies. I mean, you guys might have a great relationship, but add in those caddies to the mix, there's nothing else like it. But no, you don't have to necessarily take a caddy. You can pick and choose. If you're playing an emergency 18, late one afternoon, by all means, get the trolley, save the fee, enjoy the stroll. But take note of how much more difficult the experience is compared to having a caddy. In the end, the ROI on what you're going to spend, uh, pay comes back to you many times over.
Yeah, and I mean they've got great course guides across the pond. I actually collect they call them stroke savers, but course guides, and they can only show so much. It's an aerial view, if you will, of the hole, and having a caddy that's actually played the course where I think Cruden Bay is like the perfect example. I call it almost the Tobacco Road of Scotland. And I may be pushing it too much, but some blind shots, a lot of blind shots, I'd say. And having that caddy that's either, again, grown up in Aberdeen and been a member there or played there multiple times, they're going to know exactly where to hit it and where not to. So just adds so much value in ROI, like you said, DJ. And I'd say another question that we get a lot is how much should I expect to tip the caddy? What's customary, what have you? And I think going through the rest of the podcast, the big word that's going to come up in this, and I think it already has, is it depends. And it really does when it comes to this. It also depends on the region you're in. And I think it also depends on what course you're playing. Say Carn in Northwest Ireland, just throw Northwest Ireland in a lot, but Carn is going to be completely different than Royal County Down or the Old Course of St. Andrews. It's going to be a little bit different. And generally there's a stock straight fee of having a caddy. Again, depends on where you're at. And customaries plus or minus around 20 pounds or euros, depending on where you're at. And those caddies must be paid in local currency. So make sure you are not giving your caddy any kind of US dollars. Obviously, it's not going to be accepted, and you're probably going to be looked a little funny and maybe get needled from it a little bit. So make sure you're paying them correct amount. And I like to throw this example out there too. If you're going to Ireland and say you're going up to Northern Ireland, and in Northern Ireland you're working on the pound, so courses like Port Stewart and Royal Portrush and a few others, you're going to be on the pound. And say, for example, you're playing Arrival Day Golf and you're playing County Louth, on the way up. County Louth is in the Republic, so you're going to be paying in euros there. So again, that's a little bit of a different example there compared to just being in St. Andrews for a week, for example. But make sure you have that local currency to pay your caddy properly. And make sure you're hitting up the ATM. Like I said, if you are playing a rival day golf, I would just make sure maybe you go to your bank here in the States a few weeks before you depart, and get maybe a couple £100 and/or euros depending on where you're at, just to have some local currency for those caddies, so you're good to go right off the plane if you are. And not just caddies alone, but just having some extra walking around money, if you will, is nice.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great tip, and we talked about it last time. It is easy in the frenzy of arrival. Everybody's excited. You've got off the plane. Let's get the luggage. Let's get to the coach. It's easy to forget to walk by an ATM and grab some local currency. And usually your driver host will be on the ball and will tell you, hey, stop at the ATM. But just in case, you don't need to have enough for your whole trip, but just enough to get through that arrival day golf if you're doing it. But the rough-ish number, if you need a total number, budget about 100 euros or pounds per round. The caddy fee plus the gratuity, you're usually going to be in that ballpark. That's kind of a good round number to use. But the next one that we're going to cover is, admittedly, it's kind of a thorn in our side at times, to just be perfectly candid, and that is the question of, are caddies guaranteed? And I say it's a thorn in our side because, quite frankly, they're not guaranteed. The thing to remember is that the caddies across the pond, as they are oftentimes here, are independent contractors, or they're even members of the club itself. When it comes to the second one there, that ends up being, in many cases, one of the great things about the experience with the caddy is you're out there walking not just with a member, but sometimes, you might be playing with the current club captain, and it's just really adds to your experience. But you need to go into it knowing that the caddies are essentially a request. Once in a while, for example, in cases of extreme demand compared to caddy availability, the caddies might carry double as opposed to having a single caddy. Or in some rare cases, you might have a single four caddy for the whole group. That's not all that common, but it does happen. And the double bag caddy thing is can be more common out on the shoulder season, where university is still in session, and so there's fewer caddies sometimes to go around. And it's very common in Ireland year round, I should say. But go into it with the mindset of, if I've got a caddy, great. But in most cases, especially if you're headed to places like the Old Course and Kings Barnes and Castle Stewart, where they've got, a stable of professional caddy ranks, that caddy is going to be waiting at the first tee. But the main thing to know as well is that the club wants you to have a caddy. They are going to do everything they can to fill that request. Is it guaranteed? No, it's not. But the vast majority of the time, that caddy is going to be on the first tee just as you requested.
Yeah, and to your point there too, the clubs and the facilities, you know, they want you to have the experience of having a caddy, and they're gonna, like you said, they're gonna try their darnest to get you what you requested. And I think the biggest thing when it comes down to is, we as H&B and the clubs, it's essentially under promising and over delivering on that. So most of the times that you're going to get situated, but again, we can't reiterate it enough. It is a request, not a guarantee. So, and the other kind of question we get to, and I get it, it's can we take a caddy that's going to double bag, so someone that's going to have one on their left and right shoulder, and a lot of that has to do with maybe saving a little bit of money and keeping that money for drinks in the pub or what have you. So I get it, but it's a lot more common here in the stateside. I mean, when I was at Abandoned Dunes a few years ago, I mean, every group, there was two caddies per four ball, and each caddy had one on their left and right shoulder. So I get it, but traditionally that's kind of the opposite in across the pond. It's mostly one caddy per group, and those busy months of May, June, July, and August, and as DJ said, school's out, so a lot of those university students are caddies, and they're going to want a caddy as much as possible. And there's enough demand from us, the Americans, coming across the pond to fill those requests. So again, that's when you have less and less problems with it, which is a good thing. But yeah, a lot of traditionally it's one caddy per person. So again, it depends as well. It's a little bit more common in Ireland, as DJ said, and especially during those shoulder seasons where a lot of the university students are in school and school's in session. There's less caddies, to be sought. So sometimes you're double bagging through that as well. Most places and most times and rounds, you're going to get accommodated somehow. But again, we can always put the request in for double if what have you. But again, most of the time you're with single.
Yeah, I mean, you can always tell the groups from our side of the pond, at places like Kings Barnes and what have you, because it does look like a small battalion, if you will, moving down the fairway. Four golfers, four caddies. Sometimes there's a ranger floating around, but that's the experience. And so yes, if it's while like Connor said, while it's common on our side of the Atlantic, if you've requested a caddy, go into it expecting a single, because that's more often than not what's going to be the case. But moving on to the other question, and that is, do I have to take a caddy for every single round? And again, it goes back to that. It depends on what you want to do. At least in our case with H&B, everything that we plan is custom, so the choice is entirely yours. Whether you want to take one every round or just for some of say the bigger name courses. um, our advice is if there are a couple of days where you think, I might want to kind of get maybe a little different experience, talk to your expedition planning manager. They're going to be able to guide you to maybe the right course for that day. Connor mentioned Karn earlier. That may not be the right choice, for to strike out on your own. But there are other courses around that are more ideal for a leisurely stroll with your friends, and just the four of you. And so those courses would be ideal. But ask for that advice and then choose accordingly. Again, we're always going to give the edge to taking a caddy, but we certainly understand, if there's days where you'd rather just strike out on your own.
Yeah, I recommend everyone taking a caddy, and like it's an additional cost. I get it, but it adds to the experience. And I really had this when I played Art Glass this past October, and I wasn't expecting to have one, but I did. And Paul at Art Glass, shout out to him, love that guy. But set me up with the great caddy Richard, who his dad was I think he was the assistant superintendent, and Richard also worked on the grounds there. Grew up playing there, and he also was a superintendent in Charlotte area for a little bit too. So he had so much of experience. I got a lot of the history of the club, and he knew the course like the back of his hand, and it just added to the experience. And I played a decent round with him, and I think just having a caddy, no matter where it's at, is good. But again, it's a complete decision, up to you. So the other question that we get, and it's a great question, is, hey, I don't want a caddy. I don't even want to walk. I want to take a golf cart. And just for reference as well, they call them buggies. A lot of the courses across the pond, they have very, very limited number of buggies. I think St. Andrews has just a couple. Some of the courses have very, very limited numbers, and it's completely different comparatively to courses here stateside, where tee boxes are far away from greens and greens are far away from tee boxes. And sometimes you have to take a cart here, and it's a little bit hillier. Whereas across the pond, that's kind of the difference. A lot of the greens are right by the tee boxes. And again, just back to tradition and historical basis, you're going to walk on most of these courses. And just to note too, if some of the courses do have buggies, a lot of these courses do require a medical note from your doctor stating the reason why you need this buggy. And they just don't give them out just to give them out. You do actually have to have a note, and a lot of our groups will send us these doctor notes from their doctor, and we will then forward those doctor notes onto the courses to then officially put that request in. So it's not as easy as just coming to the course and expecting a buggy. No, again, they have a very limited number of ones, and a lot of these courses you do have to have a medical note from your doctor. So, and for example, if you do have that medical note and you're able to take a buggy on one of the courses, a lot of the times do also require a caddy to be with you. And it's not so much, if you will, a money grab or anything like that from the course. It's because a lot of these courses, and almost all of them, they do not have golf cart paths. Again, just because it's very limited walking. The caddies are going to know where the sensitive turf areas are, so they can drive that buggy into areas that aren't sensitive that you wouldn't know the difference of. So it's that caddy being there is more taking care of the course, and helping you out, obviously, as a caddy as well. But it's taking more care of the course to make sure that the buggy's not driven in a wrong area.
For me, as you know, aside from the loss of the experience with the caddy, unless you take one for driving, there's just a lot that's missed in driving these courses, and it even adds, I think, some stress having a buggy out there. I mean, earlier or last year, I should say, I was up at Enniscrone and I was gonna play, but beforehand, I drove out to the far end of the links with my drone, and let me tell you, I'm from Orlando. We don't have links terrain down here. And if you have never driven a golf cart across sand dunes, it is a little stressful. And you don't
Mm,
you don't need to add that to the mix, And so and then oftentimes as well, you might find that it's essentially the equivalent of cart path only. And so you're really somewhat just taken away from the experience. Certainly understand if you need the buggy, then by all means get it because that's if that's the means to experience the course. But if you're looking to do it just to save some steps, it's oftentimes m- more trouble than it's worth in some cases. But those are essentially the main questions that we receive related to caddies. But there's a handful of other things that we wanted to cover. Number one is to keep in mind how much walking you're going to be doing in the course of this trip. Do the math on 6 or 7 rounds of golf and all of the sightseeing that you're doing and walking the towns. It will not take very much for you to get up and over 50 miles in the course of the week. And so prepare your body, get out there, do some long walks, head to the course with your bag and walk 9 holes on your own. Really get accustomed to walking because you're going to do a lot of it. Yeah, you've got the driver host or what have you with you, but in terms of the courses, 6, 7 rounds of golf in the course of a week will add up quickly. And listen, we've got some groups that do even more than that. And by the end of the week, the last round or 2 is just kind of a blur. And nobody wants
mm.
that. So get out there and prepare the body and you'll thank yourself later.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, we have a lot of groups that'll come to us, and when we are in the initial planning process, I mean, they're going to say, "Hey, this is our one and only time," and they're going to want to play all these marquee courses, 36 whole days every single day. And as a part of us, we're going to advise you to not do that. And it's to that point because I'm going to be very very honest and with these people and be like, "When's the last time you've played 36 holes every single day for a week?" And they kind of go a little quiet and say, "Oh, I haven't." It's like, well, even playing 18 per day is a lot and it's a challenge. I know we're talking about caddies here, but we want this to be, I said it in past podcasts, we want this to be a vacation and not work. And as to DJ's point, if you're playing a bunch of golf and not preparing your body for around 50 miles plus or minus that for a week long trip, those last 2 rounds, we don't want you to be like, I do not want to play this round of golf. That's the last thing we want from you. So, prepare for that as well, which is the big thing. And for the going back to the caddies there, leave that cart or staff bag at home. They don't want to carry it, and you don't want to bring that across the pond. You want something that's lightweight, that's going to be good. For example, if maybe a caddy can't go through and you do have to carry or take a trolley. You want something that's lightweight and, get something at least at the minimum has a stand on it or something, as DJ and I have talked about in the past of having a Jones bag or just a one strap carry bag where you can throw those clubs on the ground and it's easy to take. And, usually get the best caddy, with the most lightweight and smallest bag. So just something to keep in mind too. Not just so much for packing or what have you, but just for the caddy and going from course to course.
That's a great point about having something with a stand, and it was something that I had actually never really thought of because with the Jones bag, more often than not, the caddies are just elated when they see this bag. But a couple months ago, I was at Pinehurst, and our caddy at number 2, he swapped out my clubs out of my Jones bag and into a similar size bag that they had because it had a stand. and something I had never thought of. So great point there. You know, if you've got your choice or options, I should say, make sure yours has a stand. The caddy will probably appreciate it. But last but not least is don't be afraid to ask your caddy to take some photos. You know, we are all walking around with cameras in our pocket these days. There would be nothing worse than to get to the round end of the round at, say, the old course or what have you, and only have photos of the golf course. You know, the golf course is great, but those photos are a whole lot better if you're in them. And so don't hesitate to ask. They might give you a hard time, but rest assured, they are used to it. Every single group of the year asks that caddy to take a photo on this Wilkin Bridge or wherever it might be. So don't hesitate, because you want to come home with some of those photos that you're actually in, and your caddy is a great way to accomplish that. But Connor, I think we've kind of checked all of the boxes here. Anything to add on the topic of caddies?
I think we have too. It's been great chatting about caddies, and just kind of in summary, be flexible. Again, caddies are not guaranteed. They're always on request. So make sure you're paying in local currency. Make sure you're not giving U.S. dollars. Making sure you're paying either euros or pounds comparatively to where you're at and where you're playing. So prepare your body. Another big one. I think this is probably the biggest one, to be frank. Again, you're putting a stress on your body, something you don't normally do. Doesn't matter how old you are. I'm in my mid 20s, and it's killer sometimes. So it can. And just pack light. Again, the lightest bag, usually get the best caddy. I think the last thing I wanted to end on, DJ, I think we've talked about a little bit, but the biggest thing too that I always like, and so many memories, is just the jokes that the caddies have, or just stories that you and I remember. But what's your favorite caddy story? Maybe yours personally, or maybe just someone else, if you don't mind sharing.
No, that's a great question. I'm glad that you added this in. Back in 2018, my brother and I were over, and we were in the St. Andrews area, and we were playing Carnoustie. Now, Carnoustie had hosted the Open about a month prior. I mean, so the grandstands were still up. They had just taken down the yellow scoreboard. I was heartbroken, but the first tee had basically this U-shaped grandstand that kind of surrounded the first tee. If you think about the Ryder Cup these days, where there's the stadium effect, same kind of thing. Where I think I hit my tee shot, my brother hit his tee shot, and we're standing kind of back at the back of the box with our caddy, and the gent that we got paired up with, I'm hesitant to use the word, but he cold shanks one off the tee, and it ricochets off of the grandstand right next to the tee, and essentially kind of kicks back onto the tee box. And
Oh.
our caddy, without missing a beat, says, "Course is playing long today." And and we didn't know whether to die laughing or to try to hold back, because this poor guy is playing the host
Oh.
of the Open, and he has just ricocheted one off the first tee. And so we felt so bad for him, but nobody could help but laugh. Um, I think he wound up laughing about it as well, but didn't miss a beat. Course is playing long today.
They definitely don't miss a beat. I mean, I've got plenty of stories, but my best one is playing the old course. I don't know. I think just the caddies at St. Andrews, they're the best. I mean, the group that I played in, and I mean, some of our other colleagues would say it the same. I mean, it's really cool. I mean, everywhere, but just specifically St. Andrews too. But last October, as we mentioned in the last couple of podcasts, I was successful in getting onto the ballot last late October of 2022 last year, and we're playing the old, and I was playing with my good friend Larkin, and on hole 5, the long, no, not too long par 5, but the big green par 5, hits his tee ball into the left rough, and then gets onto the green, and is up there, and we're walking up, and it is a double green. I'm thinking he's pretty tight, but it's actually a different hole, a different pin location. And the whole location for hole 5 is actually way in the back of the green, and he's in the front. And as people may know, and you can look it up online, the greens, I think, is exactly 99 yards long. It's around 100 yards. So he's got a monstrous putt to try to get up to the hole. And our caddy's coming up, and it's Larkins, and this guy is just hilarious. I mean, he's tossing just jokes all day long. I mean, it's just a great experience with him. And he looks at it, he goes, "Well, Larkin, would you like a line or a read, for grabbing his driver or having a putt? I mean, it was hilarious in the moment. But to Larkin's credit, he did two putt from there, but it just adds to the experience. And again, the caddies are going to help you with your round, but I mean, so many of the stories that I remember and just the memories in general from the courses are from the caddies. I mean, sometimes I forget about the holes, but they're from the caddies. I think that's just so memorable and something you can't take away, from those experiences. So my biggest thing is, yeah, you don't have to hire a caddy everywhere, but I would recommend it if you're willing and able to.
Outstanding stuff. Well, Connor, this has been a lot of fun. Glad we added those stories in. It's like you said, they make the experience, and oftentimes it has nothing to do with golf. If we missed anything in the process of recording, don't hesitate to send us a question. You can send us a DM on social media or email us golf@haversham.com. But as always, thank you for tuning in. We will be back with you again soon with another episode. But until then, we wish you plenty of golf at its finest and life at its best.